This is the Waterfall Cube Ultimate, a crazy looking 3D printed custom puzzle. It is the successor to the Waterfall Cube Extreme that I presented during last year's puzzle advent calendar. After I finished the Extreme, I noticed that the outer corners could be split to make the outer layer more symmetrical. This was a relatively simple modification to make, so I went ahead and made it. However, as longtime followers of my Instagram will know, I finished making this puzzle over a year ago. I simply couldn't solve it, so I didn't make any videos about it. This past week though, I've decided to get back into it and spent a few days messing with the cube. I've solved it several times by now, and its properties are really intriguing. Before we get into that though, let's look at how the Waterfall Cube Ultimate came to be. Similarly to the Waterfall Cube Extreme, the Waterfall Cube Ultimate is a 3x3 extension mod, and I've used the usual 30mm cube from Moyu. The three inner layers of the finished puzzle are simply the extended pieces of this 3x3, and that gives the cube a lot of freedom in terms of scrambling and solving it. I've also put on the outer layers parts which hook into the extensions. They don't turn as smoothly as the inner 3x3 cuts, but I'd say they still turn decently well. All things considered, the Waterfall Cube Ultimate was actually fairly easy to assemble. I'd say the stickering was the part that took the longest. But now that we're outside, let's take a look and see how it turns. The outer layers turn fairly smoothly, which is good because that was my main concern. I wasn't really worried about whether or not the 3x3 slices were going to turn well because the 3x3 is fine, like there's no concern there. But the outer layers are really where I had to get the clearances right, and they're a little bit too loose for my liking, but they turned out fine. What's also interesting about the puzzle is that the centers are all interchangeable, and you can see here that the outer layer will actually turn around any of the centers as long as you got the full set of outer layer pieces and the inner 3x3 isn't shapeshifted at all. So that's a nifty little feature, although it's not really something that comes up much in actual scrambles and solves. I'm gonna try doing a checkerboard pattern now, but that's mainly for the inner 3x3 as I'm not really too sure of how to do a checkerboard on the outer layers. I think it should be possible, but I just don't want to accidentally risk scrambling the cube, so it's just going to be this kind of awkward looking checkerboard for now. I do want to eventually try and figure out if there's an algorithm I could use, like a square one style algorithm, to swap the top layer petals so that we can also have a checkerboard there. When you make 3x3 turns that are not 180 degrees, the Waterfall Cube Ultimate is going to shapeshift like crazy, which is one of the things I like most about it. Similarly to my octahedron, I can give this thing to people and they'll have no clue that it was built from a 3x3 because all of the shapeshifting in the outer layers just look incredibly crazy when it's all scrambled up. That scrambling also creates quite a unique solving experience. You can choose to scramble the puzzle a bit more conservatively in terms of the top layer shapeshifting, and that way you'll have kind of a bandaged 3x3 scramble, or you could go all out, scramble the top and bottom layers to the maximum, and then you're basically not going to be able to make any 3x3 turns, so you'll just have it to solve it from there. Just from playing around with this puzzle, I've actually been able to put all of one type of petal next to each other. Overall, this thing is a really fantastic puzzle. It's rare that one of my puzzles actually brings me joy. Usually there's something that I'm really unsatisfied with that just kind of casts a cloud over the whole thing. But I love this puzzle. It turns great, it's amazingly fun to scramble and solve. So speaking of scrambling, let's get to it. Before I actually solve the Waterfall Cube Ultimate, I'd like to explain that this cube actually has two distinct ways in which you can scramble it. The first of these looks like this, and it's what you get by doing crazy shapeshifting on the top and bottom layers. In this state, the layers are so ridiculously shaped that you can't really do any 3x3 moves. So the degree of your scramble is decided by how you position the outer layer parts. The other method of scrambling the Waterfall Cube Ultimate is making it so that the top and bottom layers aren't extremely out of shape, so you can still make a reasonable amount of 3x3 turns. I believe this scramble type is more difficult to solve, so it's the one I'll be going with. So the first step right now is to get the inner 3 layers back into their correct shape. During this step, I'm essentially solving a bandaged 3x3, because you can see that some of the 3x3 moves are there and possible, whereas others aren't due to this puzzle's inherent bandaging. So I'll try and get the 3 layers solved and then check in. Okay, so I have solved one of the inner layers, and that allows this outer layer to actually turn, which means that I have a bit more flexibility when manipulating the bandaged 3x3 to also solve this other layer. So now my goal is to get all of the inner layer pieces on this side into their proper positions. And now the inner 3 layers are finally all back into their correct shape. This means that I'm free to move the top layer as well as the bottom layer freely. This is really good because now I can work on separating all of these petals that shouldn't be next to each other, such as this pair as well as this triple and this pair, and just in general getting all of this back into its correct cubic shape. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, here you can see that the cube is finally in its original shape. So the next step of the solve is going to be to position these corners on the outer layers in their correct spots, as well as these very thin edges. And then after that is solved, we can worry about these different kinds of petals. Okay, and here we can see that all of the outer corners and edges are in their correct spots. So the next step, which is also the last step for the outer layers, is simply to position these petals. Now you can see, interestingly enough, that this and this are actually two completely different piece types. They're chiral, which means that they cannot switch spots, which makes this a little bit simpler than it may seem. So let's get to it. And here we have the top and bottom layers solved after a decent amount of maneuvering and a slight bit of algorithms, but overall it was very unique and a very fun solve. So all that remains now is the relatively simple task of solving these 3 inner layers, which is exactly the same as solving the inner 3 layers of a 3x3x5. So let's get that done really quickly and then wrap up the video. And here we are, the Waterfall Cube Ultimate is finally solved. In my opinion, this solving experience of this puzzle is really fun and interesting. Not to mention unique, like the combination of techniques I've had to use on this cube are just staggering. You use cuboid algorithms, square one algorithms, just general intuitive knowledge for a lot of it. It's really unique and fun in my opinion, just to say that again. But that's really all I have to say about it. Thank you all very much for watching. Take care.